And so I would like to take a moment first to tee up a video that will help you learn something more about Rooted, Kenton, and Mariners, and then invite Christian up to the stage to take over.
Hi, I'm Kenton. I'm the senior pastor at Mariners, and I want to talk to you about how great Rooted is and exactly why you'd want to do it at a church. For us, we had a small group program from the very beginning, and we worked really hard to get people in small groups and said things probably just like you do. Small group's a place that you'll be known, you'll be cared for, you're loved. It's a place that you can grow. And the problem is they believed us. And so what happened is they got into small groups and they became a cul-de-sac or a dead end for their spiritual growth. They were loved, they were cared for, they found a place that they could get into God's Word together, but they could not become missional. Now, we tried everything that we ever heard at any church across the world. You know, how can you turn a small group into a missional group? How can you get these people online and getting them serving, caring about their communities? We couldn't do it, and we couldn't find anyone who could. Because at the very beginning, what we said to them is, this is a place that you're loved, it's a place that you belong, it's a place that you're cared for, that you can pray together. And because that's what the group was at its inception, you can't get it to transform. So what we decided is we had to come up with a new way to form small groups. And what we found out is Rooted. And where Rooted came from is that we decided that we wanted to find a way to disciple people. We also realized at that point that the American church doesn't play well with the other churches in the world, and that God was throwing a global party and it wasn't happening in the northern hemisphere. And so what we did is we decided we wanted to learn from a 2/3 world church. We wanted to find a place that God was blessing it. We wanted to look at how they were discipling people. So we found a great partner in Africa. They had a curriculum, we worked with them, and then what we did basically is we Americanized it and went through a whole bunch of changes and edits to finally getting to where we are in Rooted today. But it really was a partnership of churches from the 2/3 world and then from the American church.
Yes. So, in a little remote African village was a young man. And this man would get up every morning, get on his knees, face a mountain, and then pray to the creator of the mountain, as was customary to the people in that village. Now, the people in the village wondered, this mountain is too beautiful with its snow-capped tops and its lush green foothills. And they would go, there's certainly a majestic power in this mountain, and so they would pray to the creator of the mountain. A little while later, some missionaries made their way from Scotland into this little African village. And what was uncommon then, they observed what was going on in the village. And as they observed the villagers, they asked them, why is it that you pray to the mountain? And of course, the villagers explained the majesty and the beauty and the grandeur of the mountain. And it occurred to the missionaries, let us tell you about the creator of the mountain. The Africans were so intrigued that they said, please tell us more. One of the most intrigued people was this young man who I told you about. And the young man got to hear about the Bible and about the creator of the mountain, and it finally made sense to him. Now, that young man was so excited that he wanted the missionaries to go to every village in that area and tell people about the story of the creator of the mountain. And so he decided, I'm going to cook for you. Well, the young man ended up traveling with the missionaries. And he also raised his 12 kids. Yes, we Africans understand how to multiply and fill the earth. He brought up all his 12 kids in the ways of the creator of the mountain using the Bible. They ended up setting up camp in a place where now lies an Ivy League school. One of the young men's sons was a guy named David Carrier. David became a Presbyterian minister. This morning, you are listening to the son of David Carey. My name is Harrison Christian Carey Mungai. The young man in the village happens to be my grandfather. The Presbyterian minister happens to be my dad. And today, here I am. It has come full circle. The missionaries, one of the missionaries who left the village in Scotland and came to Africa, his name was Harrison. When I was born, my grandfather asked, could we name him after my favorite Scottish missionary? So guess what my first name is? Harrison, a good Scottish name. Why do I tell you this story? Missions is no longer from the west to the rest. It has become from everyone to everywhere. We're living in an epoch of polycentric missions. And so I grew up as a Christian in Kenya with my Presbyterian dad. Then I was sent to school in India, and after I graduated from law school, I went back to Kenya and gave my dad his law degree and said, Dad, here's your law degree. Now can I go to America and do what I really want to do, which is acting or play soccer? The worst thing you could tell an African parent, because there's only a trinity of academics. You can only do academics, no extracurricular stuff. And it was at that time when I came to America as an international student. After going through some challenging times, I went to a prayer breakfast in Pomona, California. Pomona, California. And it's at that place that I walked into this prayer breakfast after struggling for a while to find community. I found three of my childhood buddies. Unbeknownst to me, we hadn't seen each other in 10 years. And I walk in there, and there's Kanji, there's Harry, and there's Kaima. And we started having a wonderful time. The three of them happened to be musicians. And they told me, Christian, you like to act. You might as well act as a musician. So can you join us? And they formed a band, which became a boy band. And in becoming a member of that boy band, unbeknownst to us, our music got to Kenya, and before long we were being called to come back to Kenya. And we went to Kenya to our first concert in Kenya. It was about 30,000 people. At that particular time, I lived in Highland Park, actually in a homeless shelter because I had no place to live in LA. And yet, I was a celebrity in Kenya. When I came back, I told the boys, we're truly living in a sight and sound generation. Once you become a musician, everybody can now listen to you. And we said, truly, we've been given an opportunity to either draw attention to ourselves or to draw attention to something bigger than ourselves. Because what America does not need is another music group or another singing group. But music is such a powerful tool, and so we decided to take music as a Trojan horse to get us into churches. And as we got into churches, we would tell the churches about this new reality of global missions. That missions is no longer from the west to the rest, but from everyone to everywhere. And as we shared this story, we discovered that we had our tool in music. And this is what we use to get us into churches. And I could go on and on and on. But that gives you a little background. And coming to Mariners Church, we challenged them. We saw very well-intentioned Westerners who are addressing symptoms in Africa and not the systemic issues. They were addressing hunger and food and education. But what they were not addressing is some of the deeper issues of our continent, like colonialism and its effects. How Christianity and colonialism came together, traditional religions, or corruption, some things that were underneath the surface that the Westerners could not see. And it was at that time when I met Kenyon Bishop, who you just saw. And after trying to explain to him what I was talking about, he asked me, please help me understand what you're talking about. And I looked at him and I said, Kenyon, how can I explain to you something that you've got to experience? And so begrudgingly, Kenyon made his way to Kenya with a team of people from Mariners Church. And after meeting my bishop, Bishop Oscar Murray at that time, Bishop Oscar Murray looked at him and he said, Kenyon, there's a global party that is going on in the global north, in the global south, and the American church is not invited. How is that for a missions engagement invitation? And at that particular time, Kenyon said, I have never heard of the things you're talking about. Can you tell us more? And that's when they learned, after so many conversations, they learned about rooted. So what is rooted? So these are some questions that I wrote down because I know this is what you'd be asking. So what is rooted? What does Mzizi mean? Mzizi is a Kiswahili term or word that means roots. Now, we all know and understand that the most expensive part of a building is its foundation, is what is underneath, what you do not see. We understand the complexity and the beauty of a redwood tree. And yet, the redwood tree has got some of the most sophisticated roots. So rooted is a place that forms the path of discipleship. Most Westerners have said that rooted or discipleship is a class or a program. For us as Africans, we discovered that discipleship is a long life process. And to engage and to enter a lifelong process, you will need a deep foundation or deep roots, and Mzizi becomes that foundation. It is not the end in itself, it is the beginning. So how was Rooted created? One of Bishop Oscar's mentees was a pastor named Pastor Mureithi Wanjao, who happens to be my mentor. He was tasked to do discipleship at Nairobi Chapel in Kenya at that time. And he discovered that discipleship cannot be done in a cheap and easy way. He decided to set a high bar. You had to pay for it. You had to do homework. You had to sit in a group of at least 10 to 12 people and have discussions that were personal. It wasn't led by a talking head. It was facilitated and meeting people where they are, but not leaving them as they are. It had risk experiences. People not only learned how to pray, they had to pray. And in Kenya, he made them pray for 12 hours overnight from 7 to 7. Discipleship cannot be cheapened. And so somebody once said, tell me, I'll forget, show me, I'll remember, involve me, I will learn. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said that. And that's what Mzizi became. It became involve me. And it helped people learn. You see, discipleship traditionally has been about helping people to understand the basics of their Christian faith instead of helping people become a living representation of Jesus. We're teaching them about how to behave, to look like Christians, but not to really live as Christian. We teach people how to act, dress, talk, attend church like a Christian, but it doesn't affect the most important things in their lives, which is their career, their life choices, how they deal with money, how they deal with pain, how they spend time with others. Many become morally restrained rather than supernaturally and radically changed at the heart. And when we look at the scripture, people in the Bible were radical. They lived as fearless agents of change. So how do we disciple people to become fearless agents of change? This is what Mzizi or Rooted did. It engaged people to start living radically as fearless agents of change. It unleashed the whole church into mission. So what were some of the results of doing mission of Mzizi in Kenya as he did it? All people were set on mission. They started to engage the priesthood of every believer. That every person who comes to church has been called into the priesthood of all believers. They became change agents. We stopped having lawyers who are Christians. We started having Christians who have been called into the legal field. Not Christians, not doctors who happen to be Christians, but doctors who've been called to radically change the field of medicine. Some of these people were people like Daisy. Daisy was a stay-home mom. And one day, as she was driving out of her apartment complex after doing Mzizi, she met somebody who asked them for 10 shillings, Kenya shillings. And then a few minutes later, somebody asked them for 20 shillings. And she asked them, "What are you trying to do?" And these people explained to Daisy that they're trying to start little businesses. And so what Daisy did is said, "Could you come tomorrow with a few friends?" And in her home, she got to talk to them about corporate or solidarity banking. And together, these people would come together. Today, Daisy is running from what she started as a home group of about 6 people, circulating amongst themselves about $100, is today a 12 million savings and loans group amongst the most poor in Kenya. And today, its chaperone is the president's wife in Kenya. It's called Joyful Women. It started with Mzizi. My friend Kanji happened to be a musician in Kenya, and he decided the world of music has to change in Kenya. And so he started a campaign known as CTA, Change the Airwaves, music with a positive influence. Today, if you go to Kenya, Christian music is the most celebrated and most acclaimed music. That when Coca-Cola has an event, they will not call a secular artist, they will call a Christian artist, because the Christian artists have changed the airwaves. Anne Zilani has now helped the marginalized and the poor people start creating bracelets and artifacts from all around the world. And this money is being used in Africa to restore the people who are living in shambles, who are now gainfully employed, because she believes that you do not treat the poor poorly. These are the results of what happened with Mzizi. So, what happened when it came to Mariners? When it came to Mariners, the first thing we tried to do was, as Kenton said, is to Americanize it, which was okay to contextualize it. But at the same time, some mistakes were made, like trying to teach it. I still remember the first time we did Mzizi, or Rooted now, in America, we tried to have a talking head, a teacher. And that did not work. Because the idea of Mzizi was to get people in a rooted group and let them speak as they are. I have been in 14 rooted groups to this day in my 15 years of Mariners. It's one of my favorite things to do. One of the first things I tell people in my rooted group, I say, "This ain't your grandma's church." And before long, people are speaking very openly about what they believe. I don't believe in God. I feel that God has hurt me because my dad died at this age. I don't actually understand why we need to pray. And at that particular time, I go, now, that's discipleship. I have heard people drop expletives in the group, and you're wondering, am I really in a church? Because we're meeting people where they are, but we do not leave them as they are. We are in about 14 years of Rooted at Mariners Church. Every year, we have seen people come in. This season, we have maybe one of our largest groups with 1,200 people currently in Rooted. And this is after 14 years. Because what happens after people go through it, they go and tell their friends, and they come in, and it's become the one way that we get to engage people in a church. So what are some of the wins? Mariners moved from being a menu-driven church to a path-driven church. A menu-driven is where you come in the church and you have a gazillion, a plethora of things that you tell people to join. When you come to Mariners Church, you're told to go through Rooted. And as you go through Rooted, then you're going to go out and find the places that God has called you to serve. It's a one-way door, one entry. Instead of having 12 doors, just get people through in one door. And as they go in through that one door, their foundation, their roots are built so that they can go out and be fearless agents of change in their society. So those are some of the wins. So here's my encouragement to you as you embark on the journey of Rooted with the Lutheran Church or the Lutheran edition. My first thing is raise the bar. Raise the bar. We don't rise to the level of our expectation, we fall to the level of our experiences. That's a Greek philosopher who said that. You see, if you think about bodybuilding, bodybuilding is actually body breaking. You overload your muscles so that they bulk up. It's time for the church to get into the spiritual gym and start pushing weights. And as you push weights, guess what happens? Your muscles tear. But as they tear, they also bulk up. We get a new generation of Christians who are not going to shy away in the face of secularism, but who are going to stand up and be strong in the midst of it. A few years ago, Kenyon, our senior pastor for 20 years, of 30 years, who has now since transitioned for Eric Geiger, who's our new senior pastor, got to sit down with Jim Collins. And Jim Collins told them this story. He said, does any of your churches have a 20-mile march? And he explained the story of the 20-mile march about two teams that were racing dogs, I think in Iditarod, something that we Africans don't understand. But as these two teams were racing, there was one team that saw these two teams were racing on Iditarod. And one team said, we're just going to run as hard as we can, and then we fall and wait until we can run again. And then one team said, we're going to do 20 miles every day, come rain, come shine. And so they would run 20 miles, whether it's a good day, 20 miles and stop. Whether it's a bad day, 20 miles and stop. These are the team who would run hard and fall, and then when they're ready again, they'd run hard again. Guess what team won? The 20-mile march. Rooted becomes your 20-mile march. Come rain, come shine. It doesn't matter when or what. We'll always get to do Rooted. We get to do Mzizi because you're getting people in the gym of life. And as they do their push-ups, then they become bulky and they bulk up. This, my friends, is what the American church can learn from the Global South Church. Ask much of your people. Demand much of your people. At Rooted, we still ask people to pay $50. Do we need the $50? We don't. But we know that they won't value it until they pay for it. Would you invite your people to engage this most difficult and challenging thing? But at the end of it, the fruits will be people will be growing. The church in Kenya, as you heard, is growing. There's one church in Nigeria today. It's called the RCCG Church. Their vision is to plant a church 5 minutes walk from everybody in the world. They currently are standing at 7 million members with a very gentle, very quiet Nigerian bishop known as Bishop Adeboye. As you get your people to do difficult and tough things, then guess what? They bulk up and they grow. And one day, this nation will continue to be what it was, a resource for the rest of the world. But this is a time that maybe, just maybe, may take time to learn from what is coming from the Global South. So that's a little bit about the journey and about Mzizi and now Rooted and now the opportunity that you have at hand. Thank you very much.